You and I are going to explore the dynamic world of vexillology.
Hi, this is Dan, and you're listening to Flag Day. Together, we're going to explore the dynamic world of vexillology. Thank you for joining us. My least favourite word in the English language is the interjection actually. Actually announces an uninvited opinion, not always delicately expressed, not always well informed. There are a number of flaggy actuallys. Some are just simple misconceptions, and some are kind of bonkers. Actually, a US flag with a gold fringe is a military flag. This trial is actually a court-martial. No, it isn't. And if you see it in a courtroom, it means a court-martial is in session. Today, we're going to take a look at one of the most widespread flag misconceptions, and hopefully explode a few myths, because Union Jack is a perfectly acceptable name for the British flag. Actually. Great Britain proper is an island off the coast of continental Europe, the largest island in Europe and the 9th largest island in the world. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland comprises all of Great Britain and 6 counties of the island of Ireland. The UK comprises only the so-called home nations, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The constitutional status of the British Crown dependencies, the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man, are somewhat more complicated, and we'll consider their flags in future episodes. As we shall see, the kingdoms of England and Scotland were united under a single king in 1606, an arrangement known as a personal union. This union was formalised in the Treaty of Union in 1707, when the modern United Kingdom of Great Britain was born. So, how did this personal union come about? Here I'm going to have to outline some complicated monarchical shenanigans, so you may want to take notes. In 1503, James IV, King of Scotland, was married to Margaret Tudor, eldest daughter of England's Henry IV. A century later, in 1603, Elizabeth I, England's Virgin Queen, died childless, as is the fate of most virgins. In the absence of any immediate descendants, it seemed to the English court that the most acceptable heir would be Elizabeth's cousin, James VI of Scotland. And to this end, the Queen's chief minister, Sir Robert Cecil, had maintained a secret correspondence with James in hope of ensuring a smooth succession. Elizabeth died on the 24th of March 1601, and James was proclaimed king the very same day. England and Scotland thus entered into a personal union. That is, though sharing a king, the nations continued as separate states with separate parliaments for over 100 years. This despite the personal ambitions of James, who dreamt that England and Scotland should join and coalesce together in a sincere and perfect union as two twins bred in one belly, to love one another as no more two, but one estate. The king hoped that this new personal union should in time become a formal union of nations. In October 1604, James decreed that he was henceforth to be styled King of Great Britain, thus presenting himself as the first authentically British monarch. James asked, "Do we not yet remember that this kingdom was divided into 7 little kingdoms? And is it not now stronger by their union?" James's ambitions were not shared by either court, however. English parliamentarians were concerned that existing laws and treaties would have to be rewritten. Matters were further complicated by the two kingdoms' very different traditions of government. Scotland remained semi-feudal, the king largely ruling by decree. England's parliament, by contrast, held substantial power and was in the habit of thwarting the monarch's will. We were only a few decades away from the English Civil War, and Parliament raising an army against the king. Nevertheless, James pressed ahead. Coinage minted under his auspices bore the legend Great Britain, and, most relevant to this podcast, the king decided to unite the two kingdoms' flags. By the 17th century, ships of the two kingdoms flew the flags of their respective patron saints. England, a red cross on a white field, the flag of St. George, and Scotland, a white saltire or diagonal cross on a blue field, the flag of St. Andrew. Since James's coronation, British ships had typically flown the English and Scottish flags from the same mast, an arrangement that traditionally symbolised the outcome of a military engagement, the victor's flag flying higher. This is the traditional order of flaggy precedence, and it's still observed widely today. For example, if flown from the same pole, the national flag of the United States must fly higher than the flag of an individual state. This arrangement proved unsatisfactory, however. As James stated in the opening words of his proclamation of the 12th of April 1606, "By the King, whereas some differences have arisen between our subjects of South and North Britain travelling by seas about the bearing of their flags. For the avoiding of all contentions hereafter, we have, with the advice of our council, ordered that from henceforth all our subjects of this isle and kingdom of Great Britain, and all our members thereof, shall bear in their main top the red cross, commonly called St. George's cross, and the white cross, commonly called St. Andrew's cross, joined together, according to the form made by our heralds, and sent by us to our Admiral to be published to our subjects. In their foretop, our subjects of South Britain shall wear the red cross only, as they are wont, and our subjects of North Britain, in their foretop, the white cross only, as they were accustomed. I.e., he was going to commission a new flag. In the words of the historian Emmanuel Green, writing in 1891, James sought to amalgamate and interlace or combine the two flags so as to produce an appearance of complete union, the ideological purpose of which should be obvious. The King thus commissioned the Earl of Nottingham to design a Union flag. Several drafts were made, but none satisfied James. In Nottingham's preferred design, the cross of St George and the cross of St Andrew sat side by side in a two-panelled flag. In another, the St George's cross incorporated St Andrew's cross in the cantle, that's the top left. Other drafts, which can still be seen today at the National Library of Scotland, featured a small St Andrew's cross set in the middle of a St George's flag. Another, rather jolly design, featured St George's cross on a blue field with 4 St Andrew's crosses set in the quarters. James, however, sought a design that did not give precedence to either party. Nottingham produced some alternative concepts. On the 12th of April 1606, having decided on a design that satisfied him, James issued a royal proclamation describing and commanding the use of this banner. This first Union Jack was symmetrical, the cross of St George simply overlaid on the cross of St Andrew. The red cross of St George was fimbriated, i.e. bordered with white, so as to adhere to the heraldic rules of tincture, which forbid colours sitting adjacent to other colours. White, black and yellow were considered metals and distinct from the colours red, blue, green, etc. James and Nottingham's solution, as Boutell's heraldry observes, represents a return to the earlier heraldic practice of compounding insignia, i.e. of imposing one design on another. Despite its impeccable adherence to heraldic principles, the first Union flag met with some opposition, not least from Scots, who took umbrage to the superimposition of St George's cross onto St Andrew's. A group of Scottish eminences lobbied the powerful Earl of Mar to beg the king to reconsider this new banner, which, they argued, will breed some hate and miscontentment betwixt your Majesty's subjects. And for a time, Scottish ships flew a version of the Union flag in which St Andrew's cross was superimposed on St George's. This so-called Scottish Union Jack can be purchased from a number of online retailers today. But this experiment failed. A letter addressed to the Earl of Salisbury from the West Indies explained that the use of two flags, i.e. one with the red cross uppermost and one with the white cross uppermost, rather than prevent confrontation, instead bred many quarrels, and were very fit it were decreed which should be worn uppermost for avoiding contention. Quick digression. Why did the colours of Wales not appear in the Union Jack? Simply because, constitutionally, at this time Wales was considered English territory, having been annexed into the Kingdom of England under Henry VIII and the Laws in Wales Acts of 1535 and 1542. This new Union flag was initially used solely at sea. Land forces continued to use the flags of either George or Andrew. Officially, usage was restricted solely to vessels of the Crown, whether merchant or military. And in 1607, the Lords of the Admiralty grumbled that the first Union Jack was being flown illegally by private ships seeking to pass themselves off as vessels of His Majesty, thereby avoiding, for example, piloting fees. In 1634, Charles I declared that only the King's ships could fly the Union Jack. A proclamation appointing the flags as well for our Navy Royal as for the ships of our subjects of South and North Britain, which is to say England and Scotland. This nomenclature was not to catch on. We, taking into our royal consideration that it is meet for the honour of our own ships in our Navy Royal, and of such other ships as are or shall be employed in our immediate service, that the same be by their flags distinguished from the ships of any other of our subjects, do hereby straitly prohibit and forbid that none of our subjects, of any of our nations and kingdoms, shall from henceforth presume to carry the Union flag in the maintop or other part of any of their ships upon pain of our high displeasure, but that the same Union flag be still reserved as an ornament proper for our own ships and ships in our immediate service and pay, and none other. As regards private vessels, or the other ships of our subjects of England or South Britain bearing flags shall from henceforth carry the red cross, commonly called St George, his cross. And also that all the other ships of our subjects of Scotland or North Britain shall from henceforth carry the white cross, commonly called St Andrew's cross. i.e., the Union Jack was the flag of the merchant and royal navies. All other ships were expected to fly the flag of St George or St Andrew. Thus, the Union Jack remained essentially a royal flag. Notably, during the Civil War, the parliamentarian forces, the Roundheads, flew the St George's Cross, and the Jack was abandoned during the Commonwealth, the period during which Oliver Cromwell and his Protestant Taliban failed to re-establish Britain as a joy-kill hyper-Protestant republic. We'll take a closer look at the Commonwealth's flag in a future action-packed episode of Flag Day. But when the monarchy was restored in 1660, the Union flag was restored with it. From this period we see English power consolidated throughout Great Britain. These developments were reflected in flag usage. For example, while certain English regiments continued to use the St George's Cross, Scottish regiments were no longer permitted to use the saltire. Queen Anne assumed the throne in 1702 and pursued close integration of her realms. In 1706 and 1707, two Acts of Parliament known as Acts of Union were passed by the two nations' legislatures. The Acts agreed a Treaty of Union, and both took effect on the 1st of May 1707, the birthday of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. In 1800, the Act for the Union of Great Britain and Ireland formally incorporated Ireland into the United Kingdom, the two kingdoms having been in a personal union since 1541. Rather than deface the national flag with Ireland's traditional emblem, the harp, as had the Protectorate, a decision was taken to symbolise Ireland with the incorporation of a red saltire. We'll consider the legitimacy of the Cross of St Patrick in another episode. Irish nationalists dispute whether St Patrick's Cross was ever really a thing. Certainly the red saltire had been flown in Ireland before this date, and not only by those loyal to the English crown, though we can't be certain of its origins. For example, the red saltire, displayed in the yellow field, had been used by the King's Own Regiment, established in 1652. And Irish Confederates, who governed Ireland independent of England for a period in the mid-17th century, had also used the symbol in the cantons of their flags. Earlier, a seal of Trinity College Dublin, dated 1612, featured an uncoloured vertical cross, presumably symbolising England, alongside an uncoloured diagonal cross, presumably symbolising Ireland. But whatever its provenance, with the incorporation of St Patrick's Cross, the modern Union Jack was born. Rules of heraldry state that tinctures, i.e. colours, should not be placed adjacent to other colours. Thus, the red saltire does not touch the red St George's Cross. And the design is further complicated by the counterchanging of the red saltire, i.e. by placing the red segments in the lower half of the saltire on the left-hand side and the higher half on the right-hand side. Why? Because rules of heraldry state that the red saltire cannot simply be placed on top of the white saltire. This would make it appear as if St Andrew's Cross were merely the border of St Patrick's Cross. Thus, from 1801, the Union flag ceased to be symmetrical and became a damn sight harder to draw. The flag's blazon states that the Union flag should be azure, the crosses saltires of St Andrew and St Patrick, quartered per saltire, counterchanged argent and gules, argent being the heraldic term for white, and gules being the heraldic term for red. The latter, fimbriated of the second, viz. Argent, surmounted by the cross of St George of the third, viz. Gules, fimbriated as the saltire, viz. Argent. The proportions of the Union flag are typically 3 vertically by 5 horizontally. The Admiralty in 1864 stated all official flags should be 1 vertically by 2 horizontally. However, the relative widths of the crosses remained unspecified. The dimensions of the 3 crosses incorporated by the flag are as follows. The width of the red cross is 1/5 of the flag's height. Its fimbriation, i.e. its white border, should be 1/15 of the flag's height. The width of the white diagonal cross is likewise 1/5 of the flag's height. This cross is visible on either side of the red saltire in diagonals of 1/10 and 1/30 of the flag's height, respectively. Got that? Good. The British flag has been known by many names, some formal, some informal. The Flag Institute lists the Union flag, the Union Jack, the Briton, the British flag, the banner of the Union, the Great Union, the flag of the Union, His Majesty's Jack, the King's Jack, our Jack, and the Jack flag. In Canada, where the flag retains an official ceremonial status, the flag is sometimes known as the Royal Union flag. Irish nationalists have traditionally disparaged the flag as the butcher's apron. Initially, the flag was described in text simply as the Flag of Britain, or the British flag. At the funeral of King James in 1625, the flag was called the Banner of the Union of the Two Crosses of England and Scotland. The Flag Proclamation of 1634, issued by Charles I, uses the term Union flag. The same Union flag be still reserved as an ornament proper for our own ships, and ships in our immediate service and pay, and none other. Some insist that this is the flag's proper name. As discussed, use of the term Jack is controversial. There exists a common misconception that the term Union Jack refers only to the British flag when flown at sea. In 2013, the Flag Institute, a British organisation which researches and promotes the use of flags, investigated the matter and concluded that this is not true. They write, "It is often stated that the Union flag should only be described as the Union Jack when flown in the bows of a warship, but this is a relatively recent idea." So it seems that the British flag, flown on land and not as a jack, i.e. from the bow of a ship, has long been known as the Union Jack. In fact, it seems to have acquired this name pretty early on in its history. A proclamation concerning flags at sea was issued by King George III in 1801. The document made reference to ensigns, flags, jacks and pendants, and forbade merchant vessels from wearing, that is, flying, any colours used by the King's ship, including our Jack, commonly called the Union Jack. And from early on, the British Admiralty itself has frequently referred to the flag as the Union Jack. In 1902, the Admiralty declared that either name, flag or jack, could be used officially. But what is a jack? Why is a jack? The term jack has long been used in English as a generic name for a man. In time, the term came to be applied to small things or smaller versions of things. At some indeterminate point in naval history, the term came to be applied to the smaller flag flown from the bow of a ship, as distinct from the ensign, which is the larger flag flown from the ship's aft. I often get these mixed up because I'm an idiot, but the bow is the front of the ship and the aft comes after. It's the back of the ship. The short flagpole from which jacks are flown is known as the jackstaff. It should be noted that the term jackstaff podates the term jack, taking its name from the flag. But the name Union Jack is almost certainly derived from the flag's association with the Navy. Some alternative theories still have their supporters among the kind of people who like to interject with "actually." Some people believe the term Union Jack is a reference to the first king of the United Kingdoms, Jacobus being the Latin for James. Other sources suggest that the name is a reference to the king's courtly habit of signing his name in the French Jacques, although English speakers at the time would have pronounced this as Jakes. Still others suggest that the term is derived from the jaquettes of British soldiers. There may be more to this than it seems, for in Middle English the term jack referred to a close-fitting coat. So, is it incorrect to refer to the British flag as the Union Jack? In a word, no. Insistence that the flag is properly the Union flag is condemned by the Flag Institute as unjustified pedantry. You can find a link to the Institute's investigation, Union Flag or Union Jack, in the episode notes. Writing in 1975, Whitney Smith, personal hero, father of vexillology and patron saint of this channel, concurs, stating that, while Jack today continues to refer to a small flag flown from the prow, that is the bow, of a ship, only a pedant insists that the familiar Union Jack, if appearing other than on the jackstaff, be referred to as the Union flag. Today, at sea, the British flag is used as a jack by commissioned warships and submarines of the Royal Navy, and by commissioned vessels of the Army and Royal Air Force. When at anchor, it is flown from the jackstaff at the bow of the ship. When a ship is at sea, underway in naval parlance, the Union Jack is only flown from the jackstaff when the ship is dressed for a special occasion, such as the King's official birthday. The Union flag is flown from the masthead of a ship to indicate that the sovereign or an admiral of the fleet is aboard. If flown from the yardarm, that's the horizontal spar holding a sail, a court-martial is in progress. On land, the flag may be flown all year round, and as the British government's website states, it should be flown outside government buildings every day of the year, except on certain occasions when you may wish to fly other flags, including but not limited to the national flags of the constituent nations of the United Kingdom, the Armed Forces Day flag, the Commonwealth flag, county and other local flags, and other flags which may promote civic pride. So, hopefully that was a useful introduction to the history of the British flag. Hope you enjoyed this episode, perhaps even learned something. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your company. Please remember to like this video and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, please get in touch at flagdaypodcast@gmail.com or check out our Instagram at flagdaypodcast. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time. Bye for now.
You and I are going to explore the dynamic world of vexillology.